Welcome to the Big Ideas Show and welcome to the hot seat, Hax.
Hello.
Hello, Hax from Prisma Broadcast.
That's it.
Thank you for joining me today.
Oh, it's my pleasure. Thank you very much for inviting me.
And our topic is grabbing attention in an impatient world.
Yes.
Isn't it? We're going to be talking specifically around video and storytelling to grab attention.
Exactly. Communicating. How you communicate, I think.
Definitely. So we're going to be chatting about that after these titles. And we're back.
Hello.
The conversation today is grabbing attention in an impatient world.
Absolutely.
Right? Because
Absolutely.
how many of us see videos, all sorts of videos going around and we're just scrolling past them? How do we get people to actually engage with the stuff we're putting out, aren't we?
We're all becoming far less patient. We've got less time to spend online, watching our phones and whatever. So we very quickly make decisions as to whether we're going to watch it or not.
Yeah. And so tell me very quickly, before we go into quick fire questions and before we go into our full discussion, what's your background that kind of brings you to this place right now?
Okay, a bit of a long story. I've been a documentary filmmaker.
Yeah.
I've been in the industry for almost 30 years. So I learnt to tell stories through film. About 9 years ago, I created a media business because I thought that businesses needed to change and adapt to the way the internet was reacting. Video was becoming more popular, much more easy to watch. Smartphones were here to stay. So I then created a media business that helped businesses tell their story using video. But now that's morphed into a communications agency because we found very quickly that once we delivered the films to our clients, they didn't do much with it. They put it on their website and then they expected it to perform. Yeah. Well, of course, and we'll talk about this later on, but in today's internet world, you kind of have to put it out there and keep your message alive. And that's how you get a better return on your investment in terms of video and how the video will perform better.
Yeah.
So we then started to champion how we could help businesses deploy their films and get viewing.
So you fit perfectly into this month's theme, which is self-expression and message, right? A big thing, obviously, in marketing, in business, but for us in general, I think, isn't it? Like, we all want to be heard, we all want to get ourselves and what's important to us out there and contribute.
Sure. It works largely in business, but also a lot of people, particularly on YouTube and other social media platforms, a lot of people just want to make comment. They want to morph from their written comments in blogs to now video blogs, and actually create little videos around their pet subjects. So it may not be just a business motivation, but business, I believe now, really does need to pay attention to the way in which it communicates with its own audience and how, particularly if it wants to build its audience and what they in particular expect of that business and that business's message. Yeah,
definitely. There's loads of stuff for us to be delving into.
Very big.
But first, we're going to learn a little bit about you through some of the quickfire questions.
Oh, God, here we go.
Okay, favourite colour?
Purple, actually.
Okay, you said that was like, there's going to be much harder questions if that was Well, I guess when you're creative, right, you don't really have necessarily one colour, it's like...
Well, exactly. When I was a kid, it was yellow.
Okay.
Yeah, but
that's
now,
meant to be the most creative colour, isn't it?
Yeah, and apparently I'm a yellow, apparently, in the creative...
On what scale?
I don't know, there's some creative scale in terms of, what type of creative are you? And apparently I'm a yellow.
Oh, I want to find out what that is. Okay. Okay, 3 core values.
Truth, honesty and love.
Nice. Okay, favourite medium for self-expression or to share a message?
Video.
Oh, that was a surprise answer. I guess I read that and went, I think I can guess. Okay, favourite artist, designer, creator, filmmaker?
The director, David Fincher.
Best way to get your message across?
Oh, there's another one, actually, David Attenborough as well. He inspires me.
Yeah, it's a given, right?
Yes, he inspires me.
Definitely. Yes. Okay, best way to get your message across?
Best way?
Yeah.
To engage people
Yep.
by telling stories, I think, building stories.
Yeah, perfectly fits our discussion today, doesn't it? Okay, favourite piece of work you've personally created?
Okay, what I thought it was going to be was my Through Marseille Land documentary, which I did for Channel 4. But one of the most satisfying to see how well it was received and was productive was a film called Living Positively, and it's about getting rid of the stigma around HIV. And
nice.
It was screened in East Africa to schools and so forth. That was enjoyable. It was a challenge to make, but very enjoyable. And then watching the after product, as it were, that was the most satisfying. Definitely. So I think if there was a top one, it would be that film, Living Positively.
Yeah, you must get it must be a really moving point when people watch the people that a film is designed to benefit, seeing their reaction. I know a lot from Folkestone videos, done all those, like attending and seeing the speakers see their talks and being able to
it's a growth, and to see the reactions, and that's why we communicate. We communicate to get other people to react to us,
to connect,
whether it's positive or negative or a ambivalent, I suppose, reaction. It's still a reaction.
Yeah. Okay. Nice. What would your message in a bottle be?
Message in a bottle. Oh my God. Love lots.
Okay. Nice.
Yeah.
What's the biggest challenge in self-expression, would you say?
Grabbing people's attention.
Yeah.
I really do believe that to the core, and I've written a book about it. It's not far off being finished, but it's all about that, really.
Nice.
Yeah. Because we're living in an impatient world, a world where we consume so much digital content. It's very important.
Yeah.
That
it's that talking. If no one's listening, it doesn't matter how much you talk, does it?
Exactly.
If no one's listening.
Exactly.
It's not one part.
No.
It's the two-way.
You're right.
Yeah.
You're right.
Okay.
You can shout as loud as you want, but if nobody listens, it's pointless.
Yeah. Yeah, for you and for what you're trying to achieve, right?
But what's also amazing is one little voice can become millions, and that's what I like.
Both ways.
Yeah. Yes, exactly.
Yeah. Okay. Who's your favourite local artist or creator, filmmaker?
Creative local.
Yeah.
I have to think about that.
You can give us the answer at the end, maybe.
Yeah, I'm not sure who my local one is. I've seen some people. I'm working at the moment with a company called Story Partners, and they work with charities.
Yeah.
And I've only known them for a short period of time, but I do like what they do. Their films are very engaging and very well filmed, very well edited. So, yes, having been caught on the spot, yes.
Okay, nice. Yeah, that's a good one. That is a good one. Okay, and how do you spark self-expression and creativity?
I guess speak from the heart.
Yeah.
You have to kind of know what you're talking about, or be impassioned by what you're talking about, and that because in a way then you become authoritative, and if you sound and appear authoritative, it's a really quick way of making people listen or making people want to know more. Yeah.
Comes down to that why a lot of the time, doesn't it?
Yes, exactly. Yeah. Yeah, you find out what that is. I do. Simon Sinek's an amazing author, and an amazing guide. Really, he's got a really good point. And I think a lot of it, until his book came out, a lot of us were missing that point.
Yeah,
it was a pivotal book for me, I have to say. I read it about 7 years ago.
Yeah, definitely.
And it kind of helped me guide my clients to finding theirs, which is very important.
Yeah, definitely, and leads us perfectly into our discussion, because our overarching title was designed to grab attention, grabbing attention in an impatient world, but our topic is more heartfelt, exactly like you just said, your kind of your story, right? And finding your story, but also being able to engage people with your story through video, because that's obviously your medium, or film.
Yeah.
So yeah, can you tell me a little bit about, if we take it back to this kind of storytelling element, if we start there, what are some of the key things really for you that are important, both when you're working or that you see in the industry as, business and people communicating and trying to get attention using video, and whether they are using story or they're not, and what are some of the things that you...
I think you look for the unusual. An unusual element in someone's story is usually something that you take a bit of time to unearth. So you have to get to know the subject, you know, whether that's a business person, whether it's a business itself, or, you know, anything that I'm making a documentary on for broadcast. You get to know and get underneath the story and figure out what the elements are and who your players are. And, you know, it doesn't matter what type of story. There's, you know, usually there's a protagonist, you know, and then there's a resolution. So, you know, what happens at the end, and that's your journey to show what happens at the end. So I think that you have to kind of set it up and find those elements, and usually those elements, although they may appear obvious when you first start looking, there's stronger ones underneath if you look harder and you delve a little bit. You ask some questions. I recently had feedback from a client, because I send out, as soon as we start working with a client, we send out what we call a discovery document, and it's the sort of simple questions that we get them to answer in their own time. But usually they answer it in their language, which kind of helps identify the language that the film is going to be. And the feedback I got from this particular gentleman, he said, "My God," he says, your discovery document, that made me look at myself a bit." You know? Because you do. Sometimes you have to, in any subject, like HIV or, you know, wildlife, or if you're following the footsteps of an explorer in East Africa, you have to find out what made them tick, what makes a story tick. Because that's part of the driving element of what your stories all are going to be about. And if you don't pay attention to what that is, then the story very quickly will lose momentum. Yeah.
What's the balance, would you say? You said about, you know, when we said grabbing attention, something that's going to stand out and is maybe unique. What's the balance between that, like being different, but also then being relatable? And people being able to put, because ultimately how I always think about stories is you're essentially, someone else is going on the journey for you, but they're the guide, and you can then put yourself in their shoes. They're walking the journey and you put yourself in their shoes. So it's got to have some level of connection, hasn't it? Yes. Where's the balance between the two, and how do you craft that?
I think it's important that you make it relatable to the viewer. So it's got to twang on some level of emotion, or some level of epiphany, some level of value. You know, if it's education, and that's what it is. It's all about, you're taking a viewer, on a narrative journey, and what's the purpose of that narrative journey? If it's just to inform, then the story doesn't have to. It has to reveal, otherwise you won't get attention. But what happens is you need to create that a personal journey for your viewer, and if you don't, then that's when they disengage.
Okay. And in terms of, and when you said about stuff that's unique and catching their attention, is that would that be in a visual sense you'd normally think about that, or would it be, what are some of the kind of tricks and stuff and approaches that can be used, would you say? Well,
if you look at stories on social media, you know, it's always like sort of when this woman told me her story, what happened to her amazed me. You know,
or the clickbait.
It creates that question.
Okay.
And that's a technique which is getting very tired now. But at the same time, it's part of storytelling. You know. In filmmaking, we call it the setup. So you either you make it, it's all part of the beginning of how you actually set up the viewer to be more interested to watch the film. And the harder you hit in that setup, the more engaged they are at the beginning, and then you can then start to take them on the journey. So if you ask that question right at the very beginning, or get them to ask that question, then they want to find out. And then subconsciously they make that decision to invest time to find out. And if the reveal is benign for them, they will disengage and go away. And that's when you get people dropping off, you know, viewing figures of a video and whatever. And, you know, they may not ever have been your proper or your ideal viewer, but equally they may have been, but you haven't engaged them.
So I guess even though it's all well and good coming up with some catchy clickbait to getting people engaged, but if you can't then deliver that, it's pointless.
Exactly. And that's all about structuring a story, delivering the narrative in order in which it will keep people's interest. I mean, quite often, how many films do we watch where you actually see a hint of what's happened at the end? You know, and that's right at the beginning.
Yeah.
So you've now got that subconsciously lodged in your mind. Well, how did they get to that? You know, I want to know more.
Yeah. Are there any particularly good examples that you've seen online? I guess we're talking, because we're taking this idea of film language, film skills in a cinematic kind of context and applying them to a business kind of marketing context. Is there anything you've seen that particularly works well that you've been like, yes, they've nailed it. They've nailed that and applied it to their own industry?
Yes, I think that there are. There are quite a few people out there that have obviously taken time to study it or employed the right people to help them do that journey.
Yeah.
Too many to mention, but they stand out. And when you actually watch them, you can see the fact that the whole thing has been put together and it's a lot more impactful.
Do you think there's a magic formula? Like, because I remember watching a program about how to make a hit record, and they were trying to work out mathematically, like scientifically, the formula for what makes a hit, and they were studying the beats, the song, the tempo, all this kind of stuff, and they basically came up with it trends, but it's always changing. Do you think there's anything like that in film, or is it there's kind of recipes for a person has to develop their own unique recipe, and then it's unique for them but won't necessarily work for someone else?
I think that's true.
Yeah.
I think that's very true. They say, please don't ask them what they are right now, but they say there are nine different story types.
Okay.
And you can watch any cinema film and you can pigeonhole it into that particular story type.
Okay.
And let's face it, the cinematic industry have made every type of story out there, and so is TV. So there are formulas, but if you look at, I think there is a general recipe to successful films and videos, but I don't think it's a specific one.
Yeah.
I think you have to tick the right boxes at the appropriate time, and then when you actually put it all together, make sure that it's watertight, as it were.
Yeah, because I guess
in concept.
Because it's like a template or a formula, but then you've got to put your own why and your own message and your own stuff in, and it's never going to perfectly fit everyone's model, is it? No.
And if it's a personal story, that might have its own engaging point. That might have its protagonist, so to speak. If it's a business, it might be something very different. I believe every business has got three types of stories. I believe it's got its own owner's story and why they started the business and what motivated them and whatever. I believe that they've got the business story, which is usually why is the business in existence, what's its core values, and how does it help. And then I think the customer story. Yeah. And the customer story sometimes is the more powerful one because it actually shows how that customer's satisfaction has come across. Their journey from a desire to purchase to experience is a transition, is a narrative in itself. Yeah. And that will reflect on how good the company's product or service benefited. Does that normally kind of relate to the life, or like which one's most relevant to the life? Like when you obviously start up, you don't really know much about your customers, but you've got a really strong founder story, right? Yes. And would it go like that naturally? Or is there anyone, have you ever worked with anyone when it kind of mixes round and it's actually in reverse? No, well, I think that there's a time that the more established the business, the more case studies they have. And usually it's the case studies that prick our attention, as it were, because that we think, okay, fine, that's the way in which we can include your why, the service or whatever, as well as the satisfaction from a customer's point of view. Yeah. And from a customer's point of view, there's no stronger story than them telling other people how good your product is. Yeah. Definitely. Okay, so we've talked about, I guess, when the creating the video and the fundamentals from starting it. Once it then goes out, how do you see that video, like, it's huge now. Video is everywhere. Like, I remember a few years back and kind of people going, oh, why would I want a video? And now everyone's like, video, how do I get a video? How do you think it's changing the industry and business and how we do business, how we communicate in business?
And then also maybe the interesting thing, how it's then flipping back on itself, and how is it changing film and TV?
Yeah.
Would be a further question. But yeah, business first.
Well, if you look at business, it's a classic line that everybody's used. People do business with people, okay? But 10 years ago, and I say 10 years ago, it could probably even be as little as 8 or even 7 years ago, the only way you could find out about that person was to read about them, what they said on their website and whatever. There was very little feedback on whatever. But video is so transparent that you can actually see people, see how they react. You know, so I could write anything on a front page of my website, but if I come across and in any way I don't appear genuine in what I say and do on a video, someone's going to spot it and they're going to go fake, you know. So in that way, the social media and our networks and our mobile phones and everything are driving our audiences to expect the way in which we lean towards how we communicate to satisfy them, and they are choosing video. Because they can watch it on their phones, they can watch it on the train to work, on the bus to work. You know, they can watch it while they sit on the toilet. They can watch it while having a bath. Anything they can. You know, they can choose now when. Gone are the days where TV says if you want to watch Coronation Street, you've got to sit down at 8 o'clock. You know, gone. That will never ever come back. But now with Netflix and Amazon and Prime and stuff like that, we can download, watch live or online, anything to suit a moment. So that's now what we're used to, you know, and the young 11 and 12-year-olds sort of getting their phones, probably even a lot younger now, getting their phones. That's how they're already consuming content. They're watching YouTube videos, they're watching Instagram stuff and whatever, and they're watching it either live or they're watching it at their particular point in time. So now, and our audiences are expecting that, because you know we don't always want to sit down and watch TV or sit down and watch a particular story or something like that. But at the same time, we might want to watch or research for some information on a product or a service, but we don't have a lot of time to do it. You know, so dinner's in 5 minutes, so I'm going to do it. So what's the quickest way, instead of reading? The quickest way is for me to watch a video, and if it tells me what I need to know in 30 seconds, 90 seconds, I've done my research. You know, and on a video level, when a business person stands in front of the camera and talks about their business, their product, or the reasons why they're doing what they do, the very transparency of video is in itself a subconscious communication to your viewer, and they're assessing whether they like you or not. Maybe liking is not quite the right expression, whether they believe you are for your product. They want to have faith. In business, there's one criteria all of us in business are doing. We're selling certainty, because if we didn't sell certainty, nobody would buy our product, whether it's a service or a tangible widget. Okay, so we've now got to appear with confidence, and we've got to make sure that our viewers understand that we deliver certainty, i.e. we deliver what they're looking for.
What would you say is the balance? Because you said, get it across in 5 minutes or like 30 seconds. And this is something that I'm always fascinated with, where the line is between, we said about being authentic, right? And there's nothing more authentic than just kind of turning on the camera and talking. But often when we talk, and the most authentic way of talking isn't short, because we're kind of exploring it and being natural, how we would have a conversation, right? Versus if you want to keep it short, often you'll need to script it or pre-prepare, and then you lose some of that authenticity. What's the balance for you, would you say? And I guess this is a subjective thing, isn't it?
It is very subjective, I think.
What would your approach be?
You have to tease people. You have to tease them with information. Or just like, an English composition, that first opening paragraph is a summary almost of your composition. So in the same way, your first video is a summary of what you're offering. What we recommend to our clients is that we make small films that tease people out, and then get them to choose consciously to invest more time to learn about what more they would like to learn. So then they can watch another slightly longer film.
Okay, yeah.
So they, give them the bullet points, give them the servers right up front in 30 seconds and say, if you want to learn more or whatever, go to this page or click the link below and you can watch a 2-minute film about it.
Yeah.
Or we've just made a 9-minute explainer for a client, but it's fronted by 2 teasers.
Yeah. Yeah,
So
I guess that's the balance maybe between, when I asked you before about the balance between being unique and eye-catching and maybe a bit controversial or whatever it may be, versus telling a story and engaging. And stories they're not always long, but to tell a good story takes a bit of time, doesn't it?
Yeah.
So maybe is that the balance between the two?
It is.
And playing the two off not against each other, but complementing each other, maybe a better way.
Yeah, and it's how it's how you tell the story. There's a really brilliant story that I know with Ernest Hemingway, and he was drinking in a bar because he lived a long time in Cuba, and he was drinking with some of his mates in the bar, and they were talking about how long a novel should be, and he piped up and said, I bet you for $100, I bet you all $100 each that I could write a story in 6 words. And they didn't believe him. How can you possibly write a story in 6 words? Yeah. So they all put $100 onto the bar, and he then said, for sale, baby's shoes, never used.
Oh.
That tells the whole story.
Yeah. Wow. Yeah.
So he did it.
Yeah.
And he won $600, I believe, the story. But that's powerful. You see, again, it's a story. So you don't have to have a long, 30-page narrative or a 9-minute narrative to tell your story. But it all depends on how you use words and how you create interest and engage, as a storyteller, engage your audience.
And is that just a case of over time learning, refining your message, evolving, working with people to kind of give you feedback and improve? Because to be able to, get that down takes a lot of effort, right? Some
people are much better wordsmiths than others. I'm particularly not a good wordsmith, so I have to kind of work hard. Now with the experience I've got, I know what works narratively, particularly as a voiceover script and stuff. But that's only down to experience. But I know and have met people that could sit down and write a script on the back of a paper napkin, and that's the final script because they've just nailed it straight away. One of the most interesting experiences I ever had when I first started, I've been in business all my life because I've worked for myself, never worked for anybody else. But when I started my media business 9 years ago, I thought I should really go back to doing a little bit of business school. So I went back to business school, and one of the strongest lessons I learned in that course was how to pitch. Because you've got the 15-second elevator pitch, and then you've got your 30-second and your 90-second pitch. And it's how you engage someone, how do you become memorable, and how do you make them want to know more. So it's a series of very cleverly placed words that you repeat and you get familiar with. So that process put into film and scripts and voiceover is a straightforward process. But to keep the spontaneity, as you've just said, it's about knowing what you're talking about more than anything, and almost memorizing bullet points. Sometimes when I do a video blog, I'll have right by the camera a series of bullet points, and they just delicately remind me, without distracting my eye line, what I've got to talk, and particularly if they've got to be delivered in a certain order. So I do that, and that helps me keep on message. Because being live and being genuine and spontaneous is more consumable than being very dry and not being able to read it without any inflection or anything. And that's what it's all about. So we just reviewed a video that a client had made for them 2 or 3 years ago, and the voiceover was so monotone that the content was fantastic. It was all filmed fantastic, but the content was so monotone, or the voiceover, that people got bored, and that's why it didn't work.
It's funny, isn't it? We kind of always think about the visual, but it all adds in, doesn't it?
It's a mixture. That's the whole thing. It's a visual, it's sight. You know, you're seeing the stuff, you're hearing the stuff, and you're mixing it all together.
Yeah.
And then you're at the same time you're processing the information that you're seeing and hearing.
Yeah.
In documentary, well, in any film actually, there's a process where it's called letting the film breathe. Mm-hmm. It's where you finish something and then there's nothing happens shortly after that. And what it does, it just allows the audience or the viewer to take a breath.
Yeah.
You know, and process what's just happened or what's just been said, and that's really powerful. And a lot of people, when you actually look at people trying to make films for themselves, they are making the classic mistakes. You know, and not letting a film breathe is one of them.
Yeah. Not
having an adequate tease at the top is another one.
Yeah. Yeah, all great tips. Okay, so this is, I guess, great tips at where we're at the moment, and there's loads of video and how to stand out amongst it. But I just want to kind of finish on, where do you think it's going next? We're in this at the moment. Video is where we're at, but what comes in the short,
I think
short future?
AI and virtual reality will integrate much more. Just like now that a lot of these Xbox games, if you saw them years ago, they were, they weren't very authentic at all. Whereas I've just seen an animated film using the same software that generates the Xbox stuff, and it really, really is difficult to tell that the environment that they're in and the actor is not real.
Wow.
It's that good.
Wow.
So that's going to be where it is. And you will now people will be able to, I reckon, people will be able to create their own business avatars. So they'll be able to create a personality themselves. Yeah. And it'll be largely reflected by them, but it won't be them.
So we'll have a literal business personality, like in a person form, rather than just, in our brand guidelines or core values. It'll be a person that has all these, or an avatar that has these values.
Yeah, and it may not happen to that level to smaller businesses, because the smaller business always has, its own, or should always have its owner's face, or at least team members' faces. But it will. Chances are it could happen with bigger corporations, because bigger corporations have so many people working for them, but they have their own message. They become a living entity, particularly now the way leadership is going, and the way in which we communicate, as you said earlier, internally as well as externally. They will have to become living organisms almost that from a business level responds to their audience, to sell their product, to sell their service. Take two random occasions, old Steve Jobs and Richard Branson. They're at the top of their really big companies, but they chose to be the personality of those businesses, whereas some businesses don't. So therefore, it might be, whereas in the past it would be, let's say, an actor or an actress that would represent that brand. Now it would, the technology there to have a completely standalone avatar. I
saw that this was a thing actually now on Instagram, not quite video, but on Instagram. Robots as influencers, because then the brand has complete control over what they do. They're not going to go off and do some crazy thing, and they have to, oh God, and the brand's going, what the hell do we do?
I know.
It's scary, right? We're not even, the influencers are not even going to be real people potentially. They're just going to be a made up.
I would hope not, because that comes back down to what is driving us. From a consumer point of view, we want authenticity. We seek that in everything that we choose to research, be entertained in, or learn about. So that authenticity is a really fine line. And if people think that it's a robot that's talking that's got absolutely no character, then it won't have any influence. Yeah. But so as time goes on, that influence line will become finer and more delicate, and we will demand it. But just like the use of modern technology, AI and virtual reality and 360 and all of that, it's new technology. It's us buzzing. We're reacting positively to it. So therefore, it will be embraced in terms of marketing, at a level, and the technology will allow us to create those avatars. But whether they survive or not is yet to be seen, because by then the viewer and the audience will have changed in its tastes, you know? Whereas before we would accept being sold to, now we don't. And we don't have to. We're in control, as the buyer is in control, because we can go and research anything we want about any product or about any person. And depending on how they stand up to that research as to whether we decide to go and do business with them. So there will be a fine line of how we control that.
Yeah, exciting.
But the technology's there.
Yeah, how it all progresses. It does become tools, and at the heart of it, there's still stories, still authenticity.
Exactly.
Which is what it's all about. So.
Absolutely.
Hax, it's been wonderful chatting, really interesting. And can you, for those people who want to find out more about what you do, about story, where can they find you?
My business is called Prisma Broadcast, and it's prismabroadcast.com. You can find out all about what we do at that website.
Okay. And the socials, or is it best to get you on
I'm on LinkedIn as well, Mike Hax. Sometimes I use, my nickname is Hax, and it's also my brand, but my name is Mike Hacker. So LinkedIn, it's Mike Hacker. Facebook, it's Mike Hacker. And usually it's either got brackets Hax or brackets Filmmaker or whatever. But I'm easily,
put it in the Google.
I'm easily found. I'm easily found. Yes.
The benefit of having a unique
name. That's why I just make sure I don't end up owing too much money, because I can be found too easily.
Definitely. Hax, it's been wonderful. Thank you.
My pleasure. Thank you very much.